So I drove to Ballarat with a stiff spine and a stiff neck and a shocking sense of direction. I almost didn't go to the Ballarat Photo Biennale. 2 weeks of indecision, a slow little car and a rigid neck. I had to decide, will this little Mazda 2 make it all the way to Ballarat? It's almost uphill all the way. I worried that I would get lost or run out of power on the hills or be overtaken by the trucks. Anyway, I still went to Ballarat and I'm glad I did. So here I am in Ballarat. I really had to push this car and I now appreciate having a more powerful car. It was all uphill most of the way and I was heading into a headwind. Rigid spine, underpowered car, shocking sense of directions. This is what I did. I was initially going to take the train when I discovered my car became unregistered for 2 days and waiting for the payment to go through. But at the last moment it was valid in the state of Victoria and so it was pedal to the metal all the way. So when I got to Ballarat, I noticed I had nothing to worry about at all. I immediately found where I had to stay. Very, very clear directions in where I should park. People were so friendly. I stayed in this 1853 historic Gold Rush hotel. It became famous for hosting royalty like Prince Alfred in 1967 and political figures and singers like Dame Nellie Melba, who sang from its balcony in 1908. With significant history, including the Eureka Stockade Royal Commission. But for me personally, I was starting to think I was living in my own personal episode of Agatha Christie's Poirot. The lift is a Victorian-era cage lift with a gate which transports guests between its 3 levels while maintaining the building's historic ambience. This classic old-fashioned lift is called a cage lift for obvious reasons. Most of the time I avoided this claustrophobic rickety wooden box, opting for the ornate grand staircase. I was here for the Photo Biennale, but before all of that began, I had to get my priorities right. If you have a disability and you're paralysed by indecision about how you're going to cope when you go away, the only thing you can really do is just do it. I was lucky to have superb, mild weather throughout my stay. The next morning, I familiarised myself with the old township. Some, if not all, of the old buildings, like the courthouse, is now a performing arts school. The Ballarat Mining Exchange, which was used for trading of shares during the gold rush, was holding one of the many photographic exhibitions upstairs. As I sourced the venues and planned what I was going to see, I spent some contemplative time wandering among the large immersive installations of photographer Lycon McKellar, a Budjiti woman from southwest Queensland. Guma, meaning blood, is the title of McKellar's work. The photos and videography captures the lives of First Nations families in everyday situations, usually excluded by mainstream representations. McKellar highlights place and identity against the colonial version of urban Aboriginality. I left the house slightly unprepared and a little bit nervous. and just reminded myself that, small plans can make big trips possible. Robert Mapplethorpe is a photographer that I am quite familiar with. In fact, his work started me on my own visual journey of making pictures over 20 years ago or more. I saw his first and very controversial Australian exhibition in Melbourne over 30 years ago, so I was excited to see this retrospective of his most popular portraits. The quality of the prints are outstanding, and this is due to the photographer's master printer, Tom Barrell. Another photographer I am familiar with is Cameron Addy, a young London photographer whose personal story from homelessness to highly sought-after fashion photographer is inspiring, although I found this overblown exhibition lacking any substance. The highlight of the Photo Biennale for me was the courageous French woman and war photographer Catherine Leroy. At the age of 21, she booked a one-way ticket to Vietnam in 1966 with just one Leica camera and $200 in her pocket. After being moved by images of war she had seen in the magazine Paris Match, she decided to travel to South Vietnam to give war a human face. A year later, she became the first accredited journalist to participate in a combat parachute jump on the 23rd of February 1967. She was so small and thin that she had to be weighed down so as not to be blown away during the jump. On the 19th of May 1967, while photographing with a Marine unit, she was severely injured by mortar fire. Leroy would later credit a camera with saving her life by stopping some of the shrapnel. I am always bewildered when I am confronted by super confident, courageous individuals who immediately put their thoughts and ideas into action. My last stay in Ballarat was spent with my own photography. I have noticed recently my own work reflecting a certain stillness where my own rigid physical body slows me to the point of being very present and observing the moment deeply. Once you get out of the city and you go to, say, a country town, you really notice the culture change. People in the city seem to have this hurried and worried look about them as they rush around, especially before Christmas time, because that's when the silly season really does begin. Most of the time when you ask somebody for directions or say you want to strike up a conversation with somebody, they will hesitantly give you basic information. But in the country, people stop and actually talk to you. That was a huge difference that I found. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little trip with me to Ballarat. I stayed there for about 3 days while the Biennale was on there. And just to give you some inspiration, if you ever feel that you are hesitant about going somewhere because you have a disability, there is a famous book, I think it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's exactly what I did. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And always, be kind to yourself and be kind to others.